Before we get into today's episode, and trust me, there is a lot to get into, I want to talk to you about your skin, which I know is a weird thing to come from this podcast, but you're stressed. You're reading the news, you're probably not sleeping great, and your skin knows it. I know mine does. Facial in a Bottle by Love Indus is a single product that does the work of a full professional facial at home in minutes. Clean ingredients, real results, no appointment required. Go to loveindus.com and use code MIMS25 for 21% off your first order. All right, let's get on with the show. It's Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. Welcome to Make It Make Sense. I'm Grant Hermes. Today on the show, is the war in Iran over, or is it just beginning, or what? After giving somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen different reasons for attacking Iran, the Trump administration now can't give a straight answer on whether operations are coming to an end or are about to ramp up. On top of all that, we are definitely starting to feel the pain here at home because oil prices have skyrocketed, which means we're seeing it at the gas pumps, but also we're going to start seeing it in a bunch of other places too, like shipping as that starts to slow down, but also manufacturing in places like China and South Korea are slowing, and inflation around the world is on the edge of rising to potentially pandemic levels. All of that is ahead. But first, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts and become a subscriber to the Make It Make Sense Substack, where this week's Things You Forgot from Civics class is all about how presidents build their cabinets. Not like for their kitchens, though Jimmy Carter did know his way around a workshop. What I'm talking about is the people who hold the top spots in our government, how they get their jobs, who gets a say in that process, and what it's all really like. Because we've got a new confirmation fight over a new head of the Department of Homeland Security on the way, I thought it was a good time to go over all of that. All right, let's get on with the show. Today marks day 11 of the war in Iran, and I'm going to keep calling it a war because the president and the Secretary of Defense are also calling it that, even though it's not officially a declared war, and it's not even really clear what we're calling it because legally, both the House and Senate voted against resolutions to force Trump into actually adhering to the War Powers Act because they just didn't think he needed to follow the law, or in the case of South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, the Congress doesn't even get a say in declaring war at all.
You know, that's just a ridiculous idea that Congress has to authorize a war.
It looks like someone needs a subscription to Things You Forgot from Civics class, because in the Constitution, the military is actually more under the control of Congress than it is the president. The legislature creates the military, funds it, and most importantly is the only branch that gets to declare war. I think I'll just send him a link to the newsletter. Let's move on. The war is costing somewhere between $1 billion to $3 billion per day. New reporting from the Washington Post found that in just the first 2 days of strikes, we burned through $5.6 billion to fire more than 2,000 missiles and deploy more than 50,000 troops. And as a reminder, the cost of military conflicts isn't built into the national defense budget. What members of Congress vote on each year is called a base budget. It's designed for peacetime needs and readiness. The math is a little complex, and money can get pulled from other places, sometimes called ghost budgets. But in the end, the cost for this is likely going to have to get paid through something like the country taking on more debt, or pulling it from other departments and projects here at home in future budgets. And there's not a lot of that left to go around after so much of it was gutted in the big beautiful bill last summer. It's also not just the actual cost of the war itself we're feeling, but the effects of it, because this week the price of a barrel of oil shot up to more than $110 a barrel. For reference, that's about $30 more expensive than the average price in recent years, and it sent gas prices up to around $4, if not more, in some places around the country. The energy economist Adam Kobesi said on X this week that the fluctuation in oil prices on Monday alone were what's called a 5 sigma event, which is weird math speak, but it means that it only happens once out of every 3.5 million times. It is so out of the norm that it sent a massive shock around the world. Not to mention, for every $10 oil goes up, inflation goes up about 0.2%, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when you put that over a national or global economy, that means trillions of dollars. So why did the prices spike in the first place? Well, first, it's because Israel struck fuel plants and depots and refineries in Iran without telling us they were going to do that. And as a reminder, this was supposed to be a joint operation, so ostensibly it was about creating an Iran that was more friendly to U.S. interests. Bombing oil refineries ain't going to do that. It's also a potential war crime because, according to the head of the World Health Organization, it could poison the food and water of the Iranian people because smoke from the fires caused by the strikes at these refineries sent so much oil into the air, it rained black in parts of Iran. The second reason that prices spiked is because Iran has more or less shut down all shipping through the Strait of Hermes. And for the geographically challenged among you, it's this little strip of water between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula that would be like if the U.S. shut off all shipping between Florida and Cuba, except instead of cutting off the supply of cigars and fedoras to the rest of the world, it was 20% of the world's oil and goods. That has been very bad news for pretty much everyone. Not only has it sent the price of oil through the roof, it's caused panic in manufacturing industries in South and East Asia, in countries like China or India that need oil not just for fuel, but for like the plastics industries that use petroleum, or in countries like South Korea or Japan, where they've all ready to sound alarms because other critical materials that are shipped out of the Strait of Hormuz can't get to them. Planes have also been grounded in Asia that ship fashion brands to the US and Europe for major retailers you probably shop at, like Zara, H&M, or Primark. When Trump was asked about the prices, he said it was a blip. He said that shipping companies should show some courage and take advantage of what's called political risk insurance the U.S. is offering companies, which would reimburse them with our tax dollars for losses during the war. And then he said this.
Put them on, there'll be so much peace. But when the time comes, the U.S. Navy and its partners will escort tankers through the strait if needed. I hope it's not going to be needed, but if it's needed, we'll escort them right through.
So the president is talking about using Navy ships to protect tankers making their way to the rest of the world. Now, for starters, the Center for Naval Analysis, which doesn't have any affiliation with the actual U.S. Navy, said that the U.S. Navy wouldn't have enough ships to even escort enough oil through the Strait of Hormuz to undo the damage done already. And even if it did, it wouldn't be good enough. Because as one analyst put it, insurance doesn't make ship hulls impervious to rockets. And like, well, yeah, he's got a point. Because even if shipping restarted, Iran likely wouldn't need to hit very many oil tankers to stop shipping again, and probably cause a massive natural disaster by leaking oil into the Arabian Sea. So likely here, Trump can't buy his way out of a price shock, which means this is going to continue for a while. And speaking of continuing, that's probably a good place to move on to how long this war will last. Because over the weekend, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth told this to CBS News and 60 Minutes.
What I want your viewers to understand is this is only just the beginning. We are only just now getting over the top of the country with impunity, where now the munitions we're dropping are still precision-guided munitions. We've got unlimited supplies of them, and we'll be picking those targets and sinking those boats.
This is only just the beginning, except yesterday, Trump told CBS that actually the war was, quote, very complete. So it's either just starting or it's over. And then when Trump was asked about it yesterday at his press conference, here's what he said.
President, you've said the war is, quote, very complete, but your defense secretary says this is just the beginning. So which is it, and how long should Americans be prepared
Well, I think
for
you could
this war
say
to
it
last
both.
for?
It's the beginning. It's the beginning of building a new country, but they certainly...
Okay, so I've got more than a few things here. First, this is the third press conference the president has given about the war in, at this point, it was 10 days. None of them have been from the White House. This was from his golf club in Doral, Florida. Second, at least he wasn't wearing a hat this time, but his hair was clearly dyed. And I don't mean like professionally, I mean like the kind of spray dye you use for a Halloween costume. I don't know what that's all about. Maybe it's because he's been getting made fun of, that is, he's wearing hats more because his hair is starting to get pretty wispy up top, but he's also said he's stopped dyeing his hair. He said that like a decade ago. it's not really that important, but he looks like a scarecrow. Third, and most importantly, that's not an answer to the question he was asked, because it's clear that the fighting isn't over, but also what he's talking about goes against what the White House seems to have landed on as what we're doing there, which isn't regime change. But what he's talking about is regime change. And we've been told repeatedly that that isn't the goal of the U.S. or Israel. And even just this morning, Pete Hegseth said that that's not what we're doing.
You see, this is not 2003. This is not endless nation building under those types of quagmires we saw under Bush or Obama. It's not even close.
So that idea would seem to undercut what the president said at his own press conference about this being the beginning of a new Iran. And it seems that no one seems to know what's happening here, which also seems pretty clear from the reporting coming out of the internals of the White House, too. The outlet The Intercept talked to administration officials who were in meetings about what happens next. And they were told by one that there is no thought process into what any of this means long term. Another one said it's not coordinated regime change, it's just bomb them until they're less of a threat. And when they were asked what the plan for Iran is after they're less of a threat, the official said, whatever. It's a country of 92 million people, and our plan is the same as when you ask your friend what they're in the mood for to DoorDash on a Friday? I don't even know how to process that. And while the president seems to say that things are on the road to an end, of a new beginning to an ending, indications from outside the White House say the U.S. is on track to send troops into Iran, which, for starters, does make complete sense. Because like I've said before, there has never been a case in world history where an air bombing campaign like the one we're doing has worked on its own to force regime change, which it seems like is, I guess, at the very least part of our aim here now. In order to do that, troops have to be deployed. And today, senators were briefed on just how far along we are into doing that. And those who talked to the press after their briefing were pretty shaken up about it. Here's Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal this afternoon.
I guess I am most concerned about the threat to American lives of potentially deploying our sons and daughters on the ground in Iran. We seem to be on a path toward deploying American troops on the ground in Iran to accomplish any of the potential objectives here.
An intelligence briefing about a path to deploying troops to another Middle Eastern country for at least in part regime change, which it's important to say that Trump promised over and over in his campaign to be president again, that he wasn't going to let us do ever, let alone in Iran. Not to mention that Iran does have a new leader now, and it is the son of the recently killed Ayatollah Khamenei, whose wife was also killed in these strikes. So he's not going to be an ally, or at least anything close to friendly to the United States, should we put boots on the ground. And Stanford researchers in 2022 determined that invading Iran, just in terms of the geography, would be worse than Vietnam and Iraq, and would need upwards of 1 million soldiers, or roughly 3/4 of all active duty military members across every branch of the military on the ground just to fight in Iran. Now, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of off-ramps here. Countries like Saudi Arabia have started to act more aggressively toward Iran, and Senator Lindsey Graham has been pushing them to take a more active role in the war, and they are a leader in the Arabian Peninsula and these Gulf states, so where they go, likely the others will follow. Russia appears to be giving Iran intelligence about U.S. military movements, even though Putin promised Trump they weren't, to which our top ambassador, Steve Witkoff, said this, and I have clipped this just a little bit for time, but here it is.
Yesterday on the call with the president, the Russians said that they have not been sharing. That's what they said. So, but let's hope that they're not sharing.
Hope. That's the strategy from our top U.S. negotiator, handpicked by the president, that we can take the word of the former Russian KGB leader. What could possibly go wrong as oil prices rise and we hurtle toward an active ground war with no plan for what comes next? So when the president says, this is very complete, I think at this point it's safer to say he is very completely wrong. Okay. That is it for today's show. Please rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. Sign up for the Make It Make Sense Substack. And as always, share the show on social media. It's Mims News Pod. That's MIMS News Pod, all one word on every platform. I am at Grant Hermes on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Grant_Hermes on everything else. Thank you so much for listening today. I'm Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you on Thursday.